Is this thing on? Testing. Testing. Okay. This is Gabe Everett, and the date is, let's see, February 9th. I'm making a record of this because if anything happens, I want to make sure that this isn't forgotten or just swept under the rug like everything else. If you're seeing this video, then chances are I'm dead too. I'm going to set up a script which will upload this file unless I enter the next code in the sequence every 3 days. So, you seeing this means that I was prevented from getting to any computer with an internet connection for 3 whole days. The last time that happened, I was still wearing diapers, so you know it's serious. Of course, you couldn't have seen it right away, for reasons I'll get into later on. You're going to hear some crazy things here. I won't lie to myself. You probably will think that I'm either full of it or just another whack job on the internet. That's why I have to make you believe me. Because this happened. All of it. And from the moment you clicked on this video, you were on somebody's radar. They will take the video down when the information I'm going to give you gets back to them. And of course, at that point, damage control is going to become a huge priority. That's why it is critical that you copy this video's URL and associate it with this key phrase, cone of silence, and then spread it across the internet as though your life depends on it. And it does. The wider the message is spread, the harder it will be for them to erase it, to erase you. I know, this probably sounds like some goofy scheme to boost view counts or something, but I'm telling you, if they find this video, and they will, and they track the internet addresses of the viewers, and if you're the only one, or only one of 10 or 100, then all of you are dead. Do you understand what I'm saying? They have done it before. 100 corpses is peanuts to them. They've killed millions. And they'll keep on killing until someone stops them. Ellie and I tried, and then they took her. And now I'm all that's left. And you seeing this means they found me too. I'm sorry, whoever you are. I'm sorry that you found this, that I dragged you into it. I understand if you hate me for that. I really do. But right now, you need to copy that link and start pasting it everywhere you can think of. Make new accounts on every social media platform, on every forum, on every blog. Put this message in front of as many eyes as you can. Your only hope of staying alive is in bringing numbers into the loop. There will come a point where a threshold has been reached, and the message becomes impossible to fully erase. We weren't able to figure out exactly what the criteria were, but we know it has happened at least twice before. We know because in those cases the tactics changed. After the threshold is reached, the objective shifts. Instead of trying to eliminate the carriers of the message, they begin to try to discredit them. They will construct a ridiculous scenario which contains elements of the truth. The wilder and more outlandish the better for their purposes. And then they will pepper all the channels of communication with accounts of that scenario. Agents are encouraged to vary widely and inconsistently from that scenario. It is psychological warfare. The goal is to make their own agents appear, to a casual observer, to be lunatics, crackpots, or worse. Because then, by association, that same casual observer will ignore the real message. It happened in Roswell. Over 60 years of outlandish stories were spawned from that single event. It has been a boon to writers of fiction and other forms of entertainment which flourished in the decades which followed, no doubt. But in the beginning, it was all just a joke, a ruse, a little sleight of hand for your brain. Back then, the limiting factor was time. The world moved slower then, and it took time for news to catch up. By the time it did, the damage was already done, so the alternative plan was proposed. Many years later, a larger group attempted to leak information, but that didn't trigger the threshold. Time wasn't a factor then, because they had begun watching. They infiltrated groups of any kind, just to keep an eye on things. Any group which had successfully gathered enough of the attention of the people to make rapid information dispersal a possibility. So, when an unfortunate soul stumbled across the truth and attempted to take refuge in a militant group, they did not hesitate. The dead bodies in Jonestown, Guyana, were no suicides. They were simply in the way. But the knowledge about the fragment of technology that escaped in Roswell was nothing compared to what Ellie and her dad found out. If what I'm about to tell you had gotten out in 1947, they might have killed the entire town. Heck, they might have killed the entire state to keep this quiet. Ellie's dad was a big-time tinfoil hat kind of guy. She always used to tell him he was being silly. She didn't want to hurt his feelings, because he really was a great guy, and she loved him. She would tell him, "Listen, Dad, there's no way they could keep things like that a secret. It's human nature," she'd say. People love to hear stories almost as much as they love to tell them. No matter how well trained they were, or how scared, or how paid off they were, sooner or later somebody would spill the beans. Because from the moment people hear something that really rings their bells, they are itching to spill those beans, spill them far and wide. And eventually, that temptation will become irresistible. Of course, that was before we learned that people do spill the beans, far and wide, just like she said. But it doesn't matter, and that's why the dirty little secrets stay secret, because it doesn't matter when people spill the beans. Imagine that you had the two greatest secrets in the world under your hat. Let's say, for the first one, that you knew the location of the lost city of gold, El Dorado. We'll pretend it was a real thing. Actual buildings of gleaming gold, dazzlingly bright under a burning sun. Of course, to be able to enjoy that wealth, you'd need to involve other people. You can't eat gold, but enough of it can buy a lifetime of juicy, sizzling steaks, if that is your fancy. You'd need to get equipment and build a supply chain that you could use to gradually liquidate what you retrieved without impacting the value of the commodity. After all, it's really just a whole bunch of soft metal. Yeah, it's got good conductivity and it doesn't oxidize, but if 1 million pounds of it hits the market, or 1 billion, you'd be able to make brake shoes out of it that would be more valuable than the metal itself. The value is primarily in the rarity, in the control of it. But your buyer is going to be curious, and he's making a mint off his cut. Soon he'll have the resources to watch you and learn your secret. When he does, how will you learn he knows it? When he loses interest in selling your product, or he upgrades his lifestyle, or starts demanding to be included. There are 1,000 telltale signs, and from day one, you'll be watching for them. Because the quicker you act, the quicker you can implement damage control, and thus the better off you'll be. Maybe you exterminate him like a cockroach and get yourself a new buyer. Of course, if you do that, there's always a chance he told someone else. Here's where we come to the interesting bit. Because I said, imagine you had 2 secrets. Imagine your second secret is a time machine. That's a slight oversimplification, I'm afraid. Ellie understood that part of it better than I ever will. But it is, as they say, close enough for government work. Suddenly, your spectrum of options opens up grand new vistas. Now, when your latest buyer shows signs of being compromised, you investigate. You pour your superior resources into discovering the details, the where and the when that you lost control, and you will find it. Now, you can simply go back and silence him, right? Fire him before he even learns the truth, or have him bumped off, or whatever you like, right? Not exactly. Because your time machine has limitations. Every time you use it, it creates a wake, if you will. It can't go over the same time period more than once, because the disturbance it creates on the first pass renders the same interval unnavigable for a second pass. So you have to go back quietly and play it safe. You can fire the guy, but until you catch up to the present, you can't take any risks, because the option of undoing anything with the time machine is off the table until then. So long as you're careful and use your device wisely, you can keep any secret forever. When you hear a story about some high-profile person loaded with wealth and power, but against whom no actual charges are ever filed, yet they seem to be surrounded with the bodies of the unfortunate souls who associate with them, that person is very probably one of them. Who are they, right? That's the question you want to ask. It was the question I asked when Ellie told me. I understand where you're at right now, and I'm going to tell you everything, always assuming I live long enough to tell it, of course. But you have to start thinking differently to get your head around this. Most of the legends of secret societies you've heard of for centuries are wrapped up in this. They have had this machine for a very long time. Ellie thought they originally got it sometime in the fairly recent past and traveled back a long time, perhaps nearly 1,000 years, before they realized the device's limitations. So the founders were trapped in the past, but they had excellent knowledge of the future. As long as they didn't change things too much, and thus invalidate their advantage, they could subtly employ that knowledge and build up an incredible reserve of resources and power. They and their children and their children's children became the inheritors of that arcane knowledge. And now they are back in the device's future, where there is clear sailing. They operate now, still cautiously, but otherwise with impunity. There was no revelation which has been able to escape their grasp. They invested resources into technology to improve their response time for responding to new leaks. They intimidate governments and leaders into deploying networks of surveillance and control to further cement their stranglehold on the human race. Yes, the human race, for that is how they view you and me. Dogs, to be petted or kicked, bred or fed at their pleasure. These inheritors see themselves as beyond human. The noose is closing, and the door of our cage is swinging shut. The machine you're using to view this very account is part of the zoo being built around you. But there is this one last chance to free us all. Humanity's last hope, not to put too fine a point on it. For only a little while longer, we have a chance to spread the word so far that they cannot wholly erase it again. To show the world their tactics so the truth cannot be hidden under ridicule again. To break the chains which they have been patiently forging for 1,000 years with the enslavement of all mankind as their objective, beneath the cone of silence under which they have secretly worked, eliminating any who opposed them. We have this one chance because I know one thing. One thing which they don't know I know. I know when they used their machine to go back and silence Ellie's father.